They had been born to command, raised among marble halls, war councils, and ancestral crowns. From childhood, these men were taught that kingdoms existed to obey them, that armies moved at their word, and that the world bent before royal blood. Yet Rome, more than any other power in ancient history, perfected a punishment worse than death. When Rome defeated a king, it did not always kill him on the battlefield. Instead, it stripped him of dignity, identity, and memory, and displayed him alive before the eyes of the world. The Roman triumph was not merely a celebration of victory. It was a carefully choreographed act of psychological domination. In these processions, defeated kings walked in chains, living proof that no crown stood above Rome. A Roman triumph began long before the captive king ever entered the city. It started on distant battlefields, where legions advanced like machines, disciplined and relentless. When resistance collapsed, Roman generals did not rush to slaughter the enemy ruler. A captured king was far more valuable alive. He would be kept under guard, humiliated but preserved, sometimes for years, waiting for Rome's perfect moment. During this time, the king learned the truth. His fate was no longer his own. He existed only as a symbol of Roman power, a prize to be unveiled when the Senate granted a triumph. On the day of the triumph, Rome transformed itself into a theater of conquest. Streets were swept clean, temples adorned with flowers, and crowds gathered from every corner of the empire. Veterans, senators, merchants, slaves, and foreign visitors packed the avenues. This was not just celebration, it was education. Rome was teaching the world what happened to those who dared resist. At the center of this lesson walked kings in chains. The procession opened with spoils of war: gold, silver, weapons, statues torn from conquered temples, and painted panels depicting battles and massacres. Then came prisoners, soldiers, nobles, and family members of the defeated ruler. And finally, at the most anticipated moment, the king himself appeared. Once seated on a throne, he now walked barefoot on stone streets, wrists bound by iron, sometimes neck chained to his own children or generals. The crowd roared, not with pity, but with satisfaction. Rome demanded not silence, but humiliation. One of the earliest and most terrifying examples was Jugurtha of Numidia. Jugurtha was no ordinary enemy. He was clever, ruthless, and for years humiliated Roman commanders through bribery and guerrilla warfare. He had learned Rome's weaknesses and exploited them. For a time, it seemed that Rome itself might bend before him. But when the Roman general Gaius Marius finally captured Jugurtha through betrayal, Rome decided his punishment would be unforgettable. Jugurtha was paraded through the streets in chains during Marius' triumph. Witnesses recorded how the once proud king, who had mocked Rome, now stumbled in silence as crowds screamed insults. His royal garments were torn from him, replaced with rags. After the triumph ended, Jugurtha was thrown into the Tullianum, Rome's underground prison, where he was stripped naked and left to starve. His final words were said to mock Rome even as he died, but history remembers not his defiance, only his chains. Centuries later, another king would endure an even longer humiliation. Vercingetorix of Gaul was young, charismatic, and brilliant. He did what no one else had done. He united the fractured Gallic tribes against Julius Caesar. For a brief, dangerous moment, Rome trembled. Caesar suffered setbacks, and the war dragged on longer than expected. But Rome did not forgive resistance, it remembered it. When Vercingetorix finally surrendered at Alesia, he was not executed. Caesar had greater plans. The Gallic king was imprisoned for 6 long years, kept alive only to serve one purpose: Caesar's triumph. When the day arrived, Vercingetorix was brought out in chains, his once famous hair matted, his body weakened by years of confinement. As Caesar rode in a chariot crowned with gold, Vercingetorix walked behind him, the man who had nearly broken Rome reduced to a living trophy. Roman citizens cheered wildly, not because they hated the Gaul personally, but because they loved the message. After the triumph ended, Vercingetorix was taken away and quietly strangled in prison. Rome did not need spectacle anymore. The lesson had already been delivered. Not all kings resisted with fire and fury. Some believed surrender would spare them humiliation. Perseus of Macedon was one such ruler. He was the last king of Macedon, heir to the legacy of Philip II and Alexander the Great. He believed lineage still mattered, that Rome would respect his bloodline. After his defeat at the Battle of Pydna, Perseus surrendered, expecting mercy. Rome gave him life, but not dignity. During the triumph of Aemilius Paulus, Perseus and his children walked in chains before the Roman people. Witnesses described the crowd falling briefly silent, not from pity, but from awe. A dynasty that once ruled the world now walked as captives. Perseus was spared execution and allowed to live in exile, but his kingdom was erased. For Rome, this was victory perfected, a king alive, powerless, and forgotten. The chains used in triumphs were not accidental details. They were heavy, visible, and symbolic. Rome wanted the metal to shine in the sunlight, to clink with every step, to echo through the streets. These sounds were part of the ritual. Each clatter reminded the crowd that power could be taken, crowns could be broken, and kings could be reduced to prisoners. The triumph transformed fear into entertainment and domination into tradition. Sometimes, the humiliation extended beyond the king himself. Families were forced to walk together, children bound alongside fathers. Wives and daughters followed behind, their futures erased in a single procession. Rome understood that conquest was not complete until hope itself was destroyed. By breaking royal families in public, Rome ensured no future rebellion would grow from their name. The triumph was also a warning to Rome's own allies. Client kings watched carefully. They understood that loyalty to Rome was not optional, and betrayal would be remembered for generations. To rule under Rome was to exist at its pleasure. The fate of chained kings haunted every throne on the empire's borders. Yet the Roman people did not see themselves as cruel. To them, the triumph was justice. Rome believed it brought order to chaos, civilization to barbarians. The humiliation of kings was framed as proof of divine favor. Roman gods, they believed, demanded visible submission. A dead enemy was forgotten. A living, chained king was eternal propaganda. As centuries passed, triumphs grew grander, but the message remained unchanged. Rome ruled not just through legions, but through fear woven into ritual. The image of a king in chains burned itself into the memory of the ancient world. It traveled faster than armies, crossing borders and shaping decisions. Many rulers chose submission without battle, simply to avoid that fate. In the end, these kings are remembered not for how they lived, but for how Rome displayed them. Their defeats became Roman stories, told from Roman streets, through Roman cheers. The triumph erased their voices and replaced them with Rome's narrative. Power, Rome taught, was not proven only by victory, but by what you did to the defeated afterward. When the last cheers faded and the streets emptied, the chained kings were led away. Some to execution, some to exile, all to oblivion. The general returned home crowned in glory. The Senate recorded another victory. And Rome stood taller, not because it had won a war, but because it had shown the world that even kings could be broken, paraded, and erased. This was the true purpose of Roman triumphs. Not celebration, not gratitude, but domination made visible. As long as chains rattled on Roman streets, the empire's message remained clear. Before Rome, no crown was safe, no king untouchable, and no resistance forgiven.